We're all human. And it's important to know that doctors are people too. Doctors have emotions, they have passions in life and hobbies, and they enjoy participating as active members in the communities where they practice medicine. Doctors have families, friends, and relationships, while the latest in healthcare and the most current treatments for ailments will be topics on this Doctors Are People Too radio TV show. The focus will be in learning more about the interesting aspects in a physician's life and what they do away from the doctor's office or operating room table.
Hello, South Florida, and welcome, South Florida and beyond, and globally on the iHeartRadio app. Welcome to Doctors Are People Too. We're live here on WWNN 1470 AM. And if you'd like to call in, the number's 1-888-565-1470. It's hard to believe because it has happened so quick, but now this is the 5th show for Doctors Are People Too. So we're over a month here. Live on the air. Last week we had Dr. Stephen C. Cohen, a retired hematologist and oncologist who's now practicing internal medicine and volunteering at the Caridad Center in Boynton Beach. He's doing challenging but rewarding work as a volunteer doctor providing internal medicine health care to the uninsured patients from Western Palm Beach County. So that was a great interview. It's live on, well, I shouldn't say it's live. It was live on amp2.tv, but you can see it there as well as their YouTube page. And I'm going to introduce tonight's guest, Dr. Rahul Agganwal. I think he just called in. He's an interventional cardiologist who has an office with Tenet Florida Physician Services at 500 University Boulevard, Suite 208 in Jupiter, and on staff at Palm Beach Gardens Medical Center. But first, I want to let you know a little bit about myself before, so you know about the person who's interviewing Dr. Agganwal. My name is David DiPino, and I'm a public relations and marketing specialist. I've been writing professionally since 1999. I'm a native South Floridian. I'm most known for doing some writing with the Sun Sentinel over the last few years. I've written for the Sun Sentinel Daily and Community News Sunday editions covering Delray Beach and Boca Raton. The West Boca Forum and Boca Forum weekly newspapers, Delray Forum, and also Tribune Company and the Palm Beach Post, and about 50 other publications. So it's safe to say, you know, I enjoy writing. I've also been published in Orlando Sentinel, the Baltimore Sun, LA Times, Chicago Tribune, and Hartford Courant, to name a few. So I've spent a lot of time writing. And now I'm a PR and marketing specialist. So you know a little bit about me, but I really like to patch the doctor in and learn a little bit more about interventional cardiology. Is a very interesting topic. Hey, Dr. Agganwal, are you on the line?
I am. It's good to speak with you, David. How are you?
Great to hear from you. Up there in Jupiter, has it been rainy up there today? It's been pretty...
Oh, yeah, another day of Florida weather, you know, very unpredictable, torrential, and then dry for the next few minutes.
Let me ask you, before we get into the clinical stuff, can the weather, can it affect, the heart? I guess I'm asking more in terms of the sense I was thinking on the drive up, like if someone's already in the hospital for a heart ailment, could the barometric pressure dropping affect the heart?
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting question, and on and off over the years, every so often, I'll see an article published suggesting that it does. You know, similar to what you'll hear from a Vietnam veteran or a World War II veteran back in the day. You know, when the barometric pressure dropped, they would say, "Oh, my old bullet wound is hurting again." And there's been some suggestion that there's a little bit of a correlation between changes in the weather and ultimately stress on the arteries and ultimately creating a little heart attack or stroke. So there tends to be a little bit of a tendency, you know. And the other one is full moons. For some reason, you know, that for reasons that we don't fully understand, full moon, you see it in the emergency rooms. It just goes nuts. I mean, it's nuts on a full moon night. You know, there's some type of a correlation there between weather and us human beings. It goes to show you that, you know, we really are still connected to Mother Nature.
Definitely. That's fascinating. And before we get into your areas of interest, that can be the same with business relationships. You know, we've heard the term, my blood's boiling right now when we get angry. Is that the same kind of the stress that we can put on our heart, I guess, is the question.
Well, stress plays a major role in so many facets of our life. There's type A personalities. We see that the type A personalities tend to have a lot more coronary disease, more high blood pressure. As a matter of fact, I had a case of a guy who induced his own cardiac arrest because he was yelling at his lawyer, and was yelling so hard he actually collapsed with the cardiac arrest. And unfortunately, we saved him for a while, but it's just the adrenaline. It just overwhelms folks, and we see that especially in folks who are stressed. They tend to cause a lot more wear and tear on the heart, more pressure on the blood vessels, causing the blood vessels to be stickier. But here's a really interesting thing, David, about the whole issue of stress and business and bills and marriage and all these things, all these various stressors of modern day life. Our bodies were programmed over thousands and thousands of years to handle various stresses. And if you rewind to, say, 1,000 or 2,000 or who knows, 10,000 years ago, the type of stresses that we had were somewhat different than today. Pestilence, drought, famine, significant trauma, all of these kind of things. But how our body handled these stresses were we would jack up cortisol and we would try to slow down our metabolism and we would try to clot. If you imagine a guy walking into a saber-toothed tiger's cave and realized he was at the wrong place at the wrong time, the whole fight or flight thing kind of kicked in. And then, number two, if the saber-toothed tiger took a chunk out of your leg, your body's going to want to clot. The guy who could clot his blood had a better chance of surviving than the guy who couldn't. And so that stress response is there. What's really interesting today is that ability to clot under stress still exists. The body doesn't know that it's the saber-toothed tiger or the guy who just cut you off at the green light. But the reality is the stress still causes your body to increase its ability to clot. And so what happens is, you get these guys who are stressed, and then they clot. They clot either in their heart, causing a heart attack, or they clot in their brain, causing a stroke. So it's really, it's really fascinating. We're starting to connect the dots that our ancestors, how they were programmed, is still how we're programmed today, despite the different types of stress.
That's fascinating, Dr. Aggarwal. I just want to give out your information and the number for the callers. So it's Dr. Rahul Agganwal. He's an interventional cardiologist. He's at 500 University Boulevard, Suite 208 in Jupiter, Florida. So in Palm Beach County, northern Palm Beach County, actually my hometown. I'm a native of Jupiter. And his number is 561-627-3130, or you can check it out online. Easiest way is tfpsdocs.com and search for Dr. Aggarwal. Dr. Aggarwal, can you describe your role as an interventional cardiologist and kind of the way I've heard it described lately as a plumber for the heart?
That's right, David. I basically tell patients I'm a glorified plumber. The field of cardiology has expanded dramatically over the last 40 years. And the area that I mainly focus on, I do a lot of general cardiology, and I do interventional cardiology. And so interventional cardiology is specifically really looking at arteries for the most part. For the most part, we look at arteries, making sure there's no blockages. If there's a blockage, we take care of it. We put stents into the arteries. We do angioplasty, which is a balloon in the artery. And that's a lot of what I do as an interventionalist. As a general cardiologist, we also deal with blood pressure issues, managing cholesterol, managing rhythm problems such as atrial fibrillation, which happens to be the most common rhythm problem on the planet, and just making sure folks who have chest pain, whether it's their heart or not, ruling out issues, making sure the heart's healthy. So that's a lot of general cardiology. So I practice both. I spend half the day in the office seeing folks, and then the other half of the day I'm running around the hospitals making sure that the patients in the hospitals are taken care of, and if they need any procedures, we take care of that too. So it's a pretty comprehensive field. There are, our listeners may know that there are other types of cardiologists. There's an electrophysiologist, which is which I call basically the electrician of the heart. And those physicians, they deal a lot with pacemakers. They deal with doing what we call ablations, which are these specialized procedures where we find electrical circuits that are not working properly and correct them. And so those are the electricians. So I'm on the plumbing side of the heart, and then you have a general cardiologist who's kind of overseeing it, which I also practice, and then you have the electrophysiologists, which are the electricians of the heart. So that's sort of a broad overview.
I appreciate the clarification, because it can get tough for someone who hasn't went to as much schooling as you have, and then in the hospital doing rounds and your fellowship, etc. Now, I think listeners would like to also know, we hear about nuclear cardiology, and I think that what we think of nuclear cardiology and what it actually is two different things. Could you explain a little bit about nuclear cardiology?
Sure. So nuclear cardiology, most cardiologists deal with nuclear stress tests. So nuclear stress tests, I'll just give you a little bit of a background. So the original stress test really came about in the 1960s when we were able to really figure out how to run an EKG, somebody invented the EKG, and somebody said, well, hey, we can use this information, throw someone on a treadmill and hook up the EKG to them and see what their EKG looks like when they're running on a treadmill. And so that came out in the late 60s, early 70s, and then they invented ultrasound, echo. So then they said, well, we could use that so we can actually look at the heart by ultrasound, similar to basically the same technology that we look at babies, when they're inside of mom. And so it's the same technology, and that improved our ability to predict heart attacks a bit. And then by the early 80s, we went into nuclear. So they figured out that you can put a radionucleotide into the blood, and that radionucleotide is basically this radioactive tag, and it would float into the bloodstream. And so we would take pictures of the heart before and after stress tests. So in other words, if your heart had good blood flow, the whole heart should glow. But if there was a blockage and you stressed it, and that area where there's a blockage, that area will not glow. And so you can say, you predict the before and after images. You say, oh, there's an area of your heart that doesn't glow under stress, which means there's not enough blood flow. And that's really the science of nuclear cardiology. And so you won't really find a cardiologist who's just a nuclear cardiologist. You don't really see that, because just about all general cardiologists practice nuclear cardiology, but it's not some weird thing, connotations of what you think of the word nuclear. It's really just the context of the ability to assess the heart function and the heart arteries using a special type of modality that just happens to use radioactive material or nuclear. So a lot of folks get worried. They're like, wait, doc, I'm going to get a nuclear stress test, and there's radiation involved. Is this something to be worried about? And so, generally speaking, the amount of radiation these days we use is a lot less than what we used to use, say, back in the 80s and 90s. We've gotten a lot smarter about it. We understand that there's always a theoretical risk when you're dealing with radioactive material and radiation. But the amount of radioactive material that you get out of a stress test these days, nuclear stress test, is probably similar to that of a CAT scan, or basically spending 2 days, 2 days outside in the sun. That's about the amount of radiation that you'd get. So it's not a crazy amount of radiation, but we are more cognizant that this is not the type of thing that you want to be getting every year, particularly if you're younger, and different cardiologists have different practices in terms of, slightly different practices in terms of how young they would subject someone, to radiation or nuclear material. And, every different has a different perspective. My perspective, kind of based on my training, is I try to minimize nuclear stress tests to folks under, I try to limit it to just folks generally above, from the mid-50s age group and above. I generally shy away from that significantly for folks in their 40s and definitely in their 30s. So it just happens. It's just one type of tool. It's just a tool that we use to try to figure out how the heart's doing. And when you think of tools for the heart, everything we're trying to do now is more non-invasive. If you can try to get an idea of the data on someone's heart using a non-invasive approach versus the old invasive approach, I would say 90+% of folks and probably doctors would prefer to use a non-invasive approach if you can get most of the data that way. Are they 100% foolproof? Absolutely not. Nothing is 100% in this line of work. But what it is, it's a game of probabilities. And what you're trying to see is, are the probabilities on your side when you look at this test? And that's how we use nuclear cardiology.
Dr. Aggarwal, that was awesome. You painted a total picture. We're going to take a quick break and be back with Dr. Aggarwal. If you want to ask a question, it's 1-888-565-1470. He can tell you a little bit on the air, but it'd be better to see him in person. He's Dr. Rahul Aggarwal, interventional cardiologist in Jupiter. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Dr. Rahul Agganwal. I'm an interventional cardiologist in Jupiter, Florida. I did my medical school at the University of Florida and my internship and residency at the same program. I did my chief residency also at Chance, and then did my cardiology and interventional cardiology at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I specialize in general cardiology, interventional cardiology, and nuclear cardiology. Even though I'm an interventional cardiologist, the majority of my practice involves general cardiology. General cardiology is a pretty broad spectrum in that it involves rhythm problems such as atrial fibrillation, heart disease such as coronary disease, congenital heart disease, high blood pressure, and cholesterol problems. I do procedures such as cardioversions, which involve trying to convert the patient back to a normal rhythm if they have an arrhythmia. Also deal with plumbing problems such as the coronary arteries, which if they're blocked, I can do angioplasty and stents, which involves balloons that open up the arteries. And these stents act as scaffolds that keep these arteries open. I really do believe in preventive medicine, and one of the areas that I really focus on is diet. One can really get caught up on the pills aspect and the exercise. And diet we talk about a lot, but unless one really has some guidance as to where to go with diet, it can be quite difficult. So I do give my patients homework in terms of books or movies that they can rent or obtain so that they can get educated. Our cardiology office is located in the Abacoa area of Jupiter, Florida, conveniently located between two of the local hospitals. We provide echocardiography, stress testing, ultramonitoring, and general cardiology office visits. We really pride our practice in its staff. We're very courteous and professional. We believe that under our care, you'll feel the same way too.
To Doctors Are People Too with David DiPino, who shows us the human side of medical doctors in the community. If you have a question for our guest, call into the show at 888-565-1470. Now, let's get back to the fun side of doctors and show that they are people too.
Hey, Dr. Aggarwal, you still there in rainy Jupiter?
I am.
Okay, great. Just before we get into a few other things, so we have Dr. Rahul Aggarwal on, and you just heard a video he did with Tenet Florida Physician Services. He's an interventional cardiologist with the Employed Physician Group. I failed to say he's on staff at Palm Beach Gardens Medical Center, which is a great hospital in Palm Beach County. It's actually where I was born, so that's a cool tie-in. He's over there in the Abacoa area, Jupiter, so South Jupiter, 500 University Boulevard, Suite 208. On his number's 561-627-3130, or if you want to access him online, tfpsdocs.com. Dr. Aggarwal, the read-in from the commercial was that I talked to the doctors about the some of the fun things they do outside of treating patients. What are some of the hobbies, passions in life that you have when you kind of get away from treating interventional cardiology patients?
So, it's my hobbies, I would say my number one hobby is spending time with my family. And I've got 2 kids still in elementary school, and so they, for as most family folks know, that takes up a lot of time, a lot of extracurricular activities, karate, this and that. And some of the things that I enjoy, partaking with my family is, boating, canoeing, outdoorsy type activities, particularly here in Paradise, and that's been definitely one of the draws of here in the South Florida area. I grew up just north of here in Port St. Lucie, and definitely thought of myself coming back to the area. In terms of other areas of hobbies, which kind of ties into my work, but I still have an interest in, is nutritional science. And the field of nutritional science has absolutely been mind-boggling in the last 5 to 7 years. What we've started to uncover and basically start to really connect the dots with the historical diets of human beings. And so that's something I also like to share with my patients, and that's why I say I give homework to my patients. So I call it a hobby. You can call it a passion. I find it very interesting, and I'm able to make a difference in people's lives in addition to enjoying keeping up with all the sciences.
And we're here with Dr. Aggarwal. We got about 5 more minutes, so I'm going to throw 3 questions at you that I had prepared. We hear a lot about cardioversion in terms of heart rhythm, heart arrhythmias. What exactly is a cardioversion? Is that something that you treat patients with?
Yes, so that's a routine technique that we use to get people out of rhythms. 2 particular rhythms that it's used for the most part, are atrial fibrillation and atrial flutter. Atrial fibrillation, as I mentioned before, is the most common rhythm problem in the world, and usually when someone is diagnosed with that, it's usually an irregular rhythm. The heart's bouncing around. It can be fast. And so the objective is to try to get them out of the rhythm and hope that they stay out of it. And there are other tools that we use to try to keep people out of atrial fibrillation. But the cardioversion is one of the go-to. And most people have seen, shows on like ER or seen medical videos, and you'll invariably see someone who's having a cardiac arrest on the TV, and they bring out the paddles and shock the individual. Yes, those are rather dramatic representations of what we do, but in a much more controlled setting, we do a similar process, and that's the idea, is we do a shock. And what I tell patients is that it actually is one of the easiest procedures we do in cardiology. We don't use paddles that much these days. We use these stickers, and we put one sticker on these stickers are wired to the defibrillator, and we put one on the front of the chest and one generally on the left side of the chest or in the back, and that provides an electrical jolt, a current, if you will, that pops the rhythm back into a normal rhythm. The heart has an intrinsic circuit rhythm, and sometimes other circuits try to take over, and they overtake it and overwhelm it. But what we found over the last 40 years was that you give a certain amount of electrical jolt, you basically reset the heart back to its old original rhythm. It's like tripping a switch, but the fuse auto resets itself. And so it's the amps. For those of our listeners who are electrically inclined, we don't really use jolt. We don't really talk about it in terms of volts. We talk about it in terms of joules, which in the physics world is like units of electrical activity. And so it's very, very low amps, but it's definitely enough to, if you're awake, it would basically feel like a mule kicked you in the chest. So it's definitely not subtle. What's interesting is, the field of cardiology and science has also evolved so that people who have sick hearts, they get internal defibrillators, and those things really are pretty sophisticated pacemakers with the shocking capability. That's not something I put in, but it's something I refer my patients who have sicker hearts to the electrical heart doctor, the electrophysiologist, to get internal defibrillators. So the cardioversions and defibrillators, they're in the same genre of what we're trying to achieve, get the patient back into a normal rhythm.
Dr. Aggarwal, great explanation. I just have one more question. We got about a minute and a half. I know you mentioned preventive medicine. I actually just got involved with this. I just lost 41 pounds in 4 months, and I tell you what, my heart feels a lot better. I feel a lot better.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I go to Dr. Perez Vasquez, one of the TFPS physicians, and he finally got to me. But he did a great job. But I'm still working on it. What is preventative medicine? And I know it's a focus of yours, so if you could talk briefly about it.
Sure. Preventive medicine, preventive cardiology, basically in the modern healthcare system, our incentives currently are to put out fires. That's what we're very good at. Gallbladder goes bad, person has a heart attack, person needs a broke a leg, you get a surgery. We're very good at that, but we're not as good about how to prevent the fires. And so that's where the field of preventive medicine or preventive cardiology, in my case, really comes into play. And so I give homework. I tell folks, what is the current science showing in terms of how to prevent a heart attack, how to reduce inflammation in the arteries, because that's where the science is really going. And as patients start making these changes based on a lot of the bleeding edge modern medicine, their lifestyles are better. I mean, you're an example of that, David. Once you finally figure out how to eat right and lose the weight, things just start working better.
That is true, definitely. Dr. Aggarwal, I could talk to you for hours. You've been great. Thanks for calling in from Jupiter, and I really appreciate it. I got to have you back on in the future, definitely.
Well, my pleasure, David. Anytime.
So I'm going to wrap it up. Again, that's Dr. Rahul Aggarwal, interventional cardiologist up in Jupiter, 500 University Boulevard, Suite 208. Numbers 561-627-3130 or tfpsdocs.com. We'll see you here next week for Doctors Are People Too, where you can get some great information from the doctor on the care and passions in their life. Thank you.
Thank you for listening and watching Doctors Are People Too with David DiPino. Join us next week for more in-depth views on what doctors are all about and how they spend their free time. All shows can be seen on amp2.tv. And if you have questions you want answered on the air, call 866-224-5422 and leave a message that can be read on the air.